Okay, so we, as usual, are learning for the Menucha of Surname Dangar Moshe Montefiore. We have reached Unit 42. Some would say that that's the answer to all things. In the Morin units, we've been learning about Muktze. Broadly speaking, we've been focusing on Muktze Mechamat Gufo. Broadly speaking, Muktze Mechamat Gufo is
an intrinsic Muktze.
How do we define it, generally speaking? Not food and not a kli. And you have to understand what is a kli, right? Food. Why did you translate the word food and not kli? Because we don't know how to translate the word kli, right? It's a bit of a problem. By the way, I have the opposite problem in Hebrew. When I write in Hebrew, so I take things from, right? I take items that have not yet been processed and prepared for human use, right? Right? So how do you translate that in Hebrew? Chafatzim sounds too much like a kli. Atzamim sounds too gory, because it sounds like bones. Like I would say the kids take atzamim meha tiva, right? That's, yeah. Anyway, so what about toys? Let's get a bit of let's start with we'll see some makorot, and then we'll go into the depth of why is the toys a discussion. So the Medrash Eicha Rabbah, Eicha, so you know things are going to become pretty gory pretty fast. Tul Shimon have a mapik tlat ma'agarbin de markuin bekol aruba leilein kaita. We're not going to go into the details, but it seems that it was Har Shimon. Tul was Har, right? Mount Shimon Mount Simon used to put out lots and lots of tzedakah. In the word, Vilama Charav, it ended up being basically burned down. Everyone that was killed. Because they played ball on Shabbos. That's pretty shocking, right? That's pretty disturbing.
They played ball on Shabbos?
Yes, playing ball on Shabbos. That's terrible. It's like, really, like they played ball on Shabbos, so
they get the dessert.
Yeah, he's saying they're just desserts. All right, there you go. So the Yerushalmi has a similar take. It proposes maybe it also had to do with some kind of znut that was going on, possibly. So the Rokeach has a great midrash. He says the psukim say Vayakel Moshe et kol hadat b'nei Yisrael v'omer alehem ela devarim asher diber Hashem. Right. What is the next tzivui? And remember, what is the first tzivui in Parashat Vayakel? Shabbat. So one of the midrashim the Rokeach brings that why does Moshe immediately go into Shabbat? Because Vayakel is he gathered everyone. He says, when can you gather everyone? Usually everyone's at work, everyone's out of town, right? 42. So when do you have 42? Yeah, so just figure out. Oh, sorry, didn't realize we're on that pages. So how
on Wednesday night you can akil.
Oh, there you go. So apparently on Wednesday night sometimes you can akil, although every time, right? Three people said that I'm sorry this evening I won't be able to join, whatever. So right, there are always other things. When can you makil? You can makil people on Shabbos, and therefore Shabbos is a time of learning Torah. That's why Vayakil Moshe, and he says, "Oh, you're all here." This won't happen often. It'll happen only on Shabbos. So make sure to have Shiur on Shabbos. That's what he says. Let's see the Lashon. Vayakil Moshe amar Kadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, asu kehila gedola udrosh lehem barabim ilchot Shabbat. שילמדו ממך דורות הבאים להקיל קהילות בכל שבת ושבת לדרוש לישראל איסור והיתר. Now the interesting thing is, teach them the Hilchot Shabbat. What is Hilchot Shabbat? To have a shiur on Shabbos. Now what shiur? I don't know, Isur v'heter, whatever. Right? But the current shiur should be, the proper use of Shabbos time should be learning Torah. Having everyone gathered to learn Torah as well. Right? That is what Hilchot Shabbat was Moshe telling them. That's the next pasuk. Meaning everyone's working, so you can never gather. Shabbos, you can gather, you can do the same Vayakel we have now, learn Torah. And then he goes into a whole Musar shmuz about how you have to make sure to be at the Shiur on Shabbos. And just like a good Musar Nick will do, he gives some shocking stories. במדרש משלי, בפסוק יש את חייל מאמצע, אמר רבי חנין בר חנינא, מפני מה נתחייבו שני בניו של רבי מאיר שמתו שניהם ביחד בשבת במנחה, מפני שהיו רגילים להניח בית המדרש ובמנחה ואוכלים. Meaning they want to make sure to catch סעודה שלישית. They say, they're chanyaks. They say, we can't learn anymore. We have to run and catch the shkia, right? Before shkia, we have to eat. Then before shkia, and say, if you're leaving beit midrash, terrible. It's rough stuff, right? And he connects it to our midrash. Perek Batra, the Tanit, בירושלמי, תור שמעון למחרב, נשארים משחקים בכדור, ובטלים מן התורה. So the problem isn't playing ball per se. The problem is playing ball, well, maybe playing ball instead of learning Torah, or playing ball at the time of the shiur, right? So if you ever have, your community ever starts a volleyball, right, tournament on Shabbos, make sure to have the shiur at a different time, right? That's the rokach. You can read it in one of two ways. You can say Shabbos, broadly speaking, should be spent learning Torah, or you can say specifically in the context of now is the time for everyone to sit, to be in the Beit Midrash together, or to be in the shul together. That's not a time you should be playing. Whether there's a Shabbat, maybe. So that seems to be the focus in the rokach. The Tosfot. Why?
Just saying is that that's the reason why things happen. Didn't say that's absurd to do.
You want to take your chance?
The same way as the kids of Rabbi Meir went to eat, it wasn't absurd to do.
Right, but it's not a good idea. No, I agree. I agree. The Rokach doesn't see an Isur, right? It's not you wouldn't turn this into a safe in the Shulchan Aruch. I might contend otherwise shortly, but right, the you wouldn't say it's an Isur to play the ball on Shabbos. You'd say even during the drasha, you just say clearly that's not what Hashem wants, right?
And regard to Rabbi Meir's kids.
At knife point, right? Yeah,
Rabbi Meir's kids. I mean, they're moving back to Talmud Torah to be kind of mitzvah.
Right. So that's even more shocking. So what's the Rokach saying? I think he's saying that with all due respect to the mitzvah, you have to know your priorities. And the public forum of learning Torah together is more important than the individual's mitzvah. I think that's what he's saying. Again, I agree. It's pretty shocking, right? Yeah. It's like they went to do a mitzvah. Like they thought they're being chanyaks, right? They thought that we're more firm than the rest of you. We're running home to catch the shkia, right? That's when we once had a Shabbos, my whole shiur in Yerucham. We went to Shvut Yisrael. We went to the yeshiva. So we heard that we had mincha, and then Rav Shatar Rapport gave a shiur. And he finished like an easy 20 minutes after Shkia, and then they all went to eat Sudah Shlishit. And Steinmetz, of course, went over and said, hasn't been Shkia, what's and he says, like, so Tosfot say from this, right? Tosfot say, based on these ideas, that you could that you're allowed to play ball on Shabbos and Yantiv, basically. You're allowed to play ball on Shabbos and Yantiv. You just need to be aware of when is the communal time to be in the shul and the Beit Midrash. But playing ball per se is not an Isur, right? That's what the Mata Moshe. He was one of the Maharshal's Talmidim, so we're not talking about Mata Moshe. Sounds like someone from the last century, right? So not at all. Right, we're talking 400 years ago, Beit Yosef's time, a bit after, but around then. Mata Moshe, he says, if your minhag was to say the drasha on Shabbos, and in Mishlei, we have the story with Rabbi Meir's children, v'chulei. I'm skipping to the underlined line. So you could play ball, just not at the communal time when you should be all having the shiur together. So playing ball per se is not a problem. So that's his conclusion. The Amsha Shlomo, his Rebbe, disagrees. See on the next page. Dvar teima להתיר ביום טוב לשחק בכדור, דאין בו צורך היום כלל, אלא שחוק של ילדים שלא הגיעו לכלל חיוב הנח. בגדולים נראה מנהג רע בעיניי, כי זה אינו טיול אלא שיחת ילדים וקלות ראש. But also the Maharshal is saying something else. He's not, the Maharshal is saying, why would you play ball on Shabbos? Why would you do that? You should be, not only at Midrash time, generally speaking, you have better things to do. But it sounds more like a Musar statement than a halachic statement per se. Right, Danny, as you're saying, right? It's also the Maharshal, like the Mata Moshe says you're allowed. The Maharshal says you pass nicht. Right? It's a pass nicht claim. It's not a, like you should be doing better things with your time.
Just there's, would we view this differently as playing ball with your children or playing ball for your?
Oh, we're going to get back to your question. I agree. I very much agree with the question. We're going to get back to it soon. First, I want to see some more directions. The Rambam has a description, was asked about drinking games on Shabbos. Drinking games. So it's fun. You say you go to Gedol Ador and you want to ask him about drinking games. Right? It's wonderful. Right?
I thought the Rambam played baseball.
The Rambam played baseball? So they used to say about they used to call Rav Lichtenstein the babe, because every answer he gave was a home run. And in YU, when he was a Talmid, when he was in YU, in the Midrash in YU, and as a Talmid, they used to call him the babe because it was the Babe Ruth time, and he was every answer of his was a home run. But he also used to play basketball with his Talmidim on Fridays. So we'll get back to Glenn's point shortly. So the Rambam was asked about drinking games, and I love this. I love that someone can feel comfortable. Someone from my community asked me, he says, I don't always wear a kippah at home, and I want to know like what the halachot are of like, when do I have to wear a kippah, when do I not have to wear a kippah? And afterwards, when his wife heard about this, she said like, I met them at like a kiddush, and I mentioned something about it, and she said, you asked him the shaila, you're embarrassed to ask such a thing? And I said to her, Afuch, I think that's to me that's it's a show of camaraderie, like we can, like he trusts that we can really have real discussions about this. I think it's a good thing. And so the Rambam apparently was very approachable. People were asking about drinking games. קצת יהודים מתקבצים על משתי היין בשבתות ובמועדים, וביניהם אבנים מאשת שן. It's from, I think, ivory, right? But basically dice, right? לשחק, dice. לשחק בהם על כוסות היין ושינצח ישתה. I thought it goes the other way around, that whoever loses drinks, but all right, each their own. גם יין אחר מגרעינים, if someone can figure this out, I'll be very happy. לוקחים 3 גרעינים וחצי, ותהיה עם אדם אחד, ייקח מהם קצתם, ישליך על העומדים בדרך הסיבוב, fling them around or something, I don't know what this means. מי שיבוא בו ישתה ויצחק.
Like spin the bottle as a drinking game.
Spin the bottle, spin the nuts, spin the right seeds, whatever, right? So you take some like nuts and like throw it at the people, and whoever would get hit would have to drink. Mashu kaze, right? All right. Haim ze mutar b'shabbatot v'moadim imlav. We have to do this on Shabbos. Drinking games. We have to play these kinds of drinking games on Shabbos. It's like with dice or with throwing nuts around and Omnam tiltul avnei eshet shen bilti ra'ui. Why? Carrying the dice is inappropriate. What does that mean? No explanation. Omnam letzachek begreinim v'domehem mutar hatiltul. So the nuts and the seeds, whatever this is, you're allowed to carry. It sounds like you're not allowed to carry the dice. You are allowed to carry the nuts. The nuts were their foods. You're allowed to carry them. Okay, fine, fair enough. The seeds, I'm not quite sure what I'm talking about.
Issues with gambling and dice. The connection between gambling and dice is pretty.
But that's the next sentence. Says, Shabbos-wise, there's no problem. You should be asking first, I'm not allowed to do this on Tuesday, right? Because if you have a bet, right, that kind of bet that then you'll have to, that will compel you to do something, that's a Mesachik B'Kubiyah type of thing. Now, I don't think he means Mesachik B'Kubiyah Doraisa, But I think he means that, generally speaking, making a bet that then compels you to do something.
No money here that is like,
So-
neither a smart-
נכון. So, well, smachta, right. So
If
there,
you don't do 7 days a week, then. it's not
right.
fun.
So I agree. The question is, does he mean that people are wasting their time too much? Does he mean that?
It disqualifies.
Because I tried connecting it more to something like the smachta in terms of I'm being compelled based on assuming. But I agree that it's very the Rambam himself. He's like Misal Kubia. It sounds more like inappropriate. But what's important to me is that the Rambam has two separate issues here, right? One is the Misal Kubia aspect of it. The other is that carrying the dice is inappropriate. What does that mean? Bilti ra'ui, as opposed to the nuts, the seeds, all those things. That there's no problem with carrying, but you really shouldn't do it ever. So why not to do it? Fine. Why not to play drinking games? So, but that aside for the moment, separate here about drinking games, not today. Shabbos-wise, he talks about not carrying the dice. Why not? Not so clear. All right. So Shibolaraket, what he does is he's the first one to connect the idea of Tul Shimon to Muktze. We'll see in Shibolaraket. This is a bit of a complicated issue. I'm not going to go into all the details here, but Bigadol, what was a ball back then? What was a ball? Broadly speaking, my understanding is they'd have some kind of
Rags, things tied up or
put a rag into a bag, and that would be your thing, right?
they would make it out of rags or what I think.
Right, you'd stuff a rag into a leather pouch, and that's your ball, right? So,
Or it could have been some piece of wood that's been rounded.
okay, so the Shibboleth says he discusses this called the Kli. So he proves from Sanhedrin. There's discussion about are these Kilim, is a ball Mekabel Tum'ah? Not going to go into all the intricacies of that, not at all. But what now skip to the middle. You see the end of the line. Umori Rabbi Yehuda. Last word in the line is Rabbi Yehuda. 5 lines from the top. Achi Sheni. פירש שדווקא אותו כדור שנחלקו בו רבי אליעזר וחכמים הנראה חלל שלו חשיב כלי. אבל הכדורים שלנו אפילו כלי לא חשיבי. Now, from the context, you can see that he says, if we're talking about a ball, it's very interesting. I didn't bring all the details here, but if it's a ball that really is some kind of bag, a leather pouch or something like that, that has a rag in it, so it could contain a rag. So that is Mekabel Tumah because it's a kli. It could contain something, and therefore it's also kli linyan Shabbat, and then you're allowed to carry it. But if it's just a rounded off ball, right, piece of wood that's just rounded off as a ball, that's not a kli. Why? Because it can't hold anything. It is interesting. When we talk about kilim on Shabbos, we're talking about the functionality of the kli, right? Any stone can be used, but I need to define the functionality of the kli before Shabbat, otherwise it's muktzah, right? So I have this rounded off ball. What's the functionality of this ball? What do I do with it? What makes it a kli? So you can play a game, right? He seems to ignore that. It says, if it's a pouch that you stuff rags into, then it's mekabel tum'ah, then it's really a kli because it's a pouch. But if it's just a rounded off ball, it's not mekabel tumah, and it's also not, and it's also muktzah. Let's see. He says this quite clearly later on. אלו הכדורים שלנו אפילו כלי לא חשיבי, מחשבת התינוק שחישב לשחק בו לא משב אלי כלי. So you say the child wants to play with the ball, but that doesn't count as a kli. Oh, excellent. Is the problem that the child doesn't have the ability, the authority, whatever that is, right, to define the ball? Is that the issue? Or is the issue that anyone who defines it as a plaything, right, a toy is not a kli? I want to go deeper into that after we see some more achronim, but this seems right. The question is, if an adult would define it as something to play with, right? If we have adult games, right? I just forget the word I want to say. volleyball tournament. Thank you. If you have the volleyball tournament, because this was a contentious point in our neighborhood. If you have a volleyball tournament on Shabbos, and adults are playing, right? Does that make the ball? So we have adults defining the balls as a kli. So it's a kli. Or do I say no? But a kli by definition, a ball is not a kli. All right, we're going to have to go deeper into this soon. But basically, that's, and then he ends off. See 2 lines from the bottom. Matzinu b'midrash eicha tul shimon avemapik tlat mea garbin demarkoa b'kol aruvot Shabbat leilein kaita lama acharav in teroshim znut al riva achata sham v'otziu misham. So it wasn't because of the adultery issue. Lama acharav amar Avuna al yidei she'em misachkin b'kadur b'Shabbat. So the Shibolalaket is the first one to say why. What was the problem of playing the ball on Shabbat? Not because it's Bitul Torah, not because it's ruining the Beit Midrash vibe, ela because it's Mukta. All right. So, Lehalacha, Shulchan Aruch says, Asur l'sarek b'Shabbat v'yom tov b'kadur, which is notable. What's notable about that sentence? Asur l'sarek b'Shabbat v'yom tov b'kadur. So he goes by the Shibolalaket and maybe also Tshuvat Rambam. But what's
We added the word asur for the first time. We haven't really seen.
what Shibolalaket says?
He said explicitly that it's asur. Oh, so he does.
Yeah, Shibolalaket, yes. But what's missing, or what's strange about the sentence? Yaakov, how would you phrase that? The psak. If you would have to give a brief psak of what the Shibolalaket said, how would you phrase that? Asur l'taltel. That's not what it says in Shulchan Aruch. Asur l'sachek. Right? Interesting. On the other hand,
And there's no rationale, even a short rationale.
rationale to us are playing, you're asking. So you could argue that there is a rationale for that, but the other thing that's notable is where is this safe in the Shulchan Aruch? So the Shulchan Aruch intended on connecting this to V'daber Davar, to the appropriate things to do on Shabbos. This would be in Siman Shin Zayin, which we learned extensively in the previous series, right? That's where the V'daber Davar is. The Shulchan Aruch here is what Siman? Shin Ched. Shin Ched is all about Mukta. So on the one hand, he writes, on the other hand, he gives the psak in Siman Shin Ched, where we're discussing Mukta. Right? Interesting point. Says the Rama, Yesh Meterim and Agul Akel. So Ashkenazim are kind of off the hook here. Right? So I want to skip over to the Sephardi Poskim. I mean, those who the Nosei Kelim and the Sephardi Poskim. So skip over to the next page for a moment. It says the Magen Avraham, page 3. What does the Magen Avraham mean? No, I agree. I said the Nosei Kelim on Shulchan Aruch too. He's explaining Shulchan Aruch. He's discussing the Shulchan Aruch. He says, what does that mean? Machshava does not suffice to turn into a kli. So the Pri Megadim, okay. But if you actually use the kli, you actually use the ball, so it will be, right? Right, the Magen Avraham says, you can read the Magen Avraham in 2 ways. You can say, intention of playing is not something that makes it not muktzah. Or you could say, machshava doesn't suffice. You need a stronger action, right? We learned in Unit 38, we learned about what is required in order to make something not muktzah anymore, to turn it into a kli. You have to use it, you have to intend, you have to change it, right? So you can read the Magen Avraham as machshava isn't sufficient. That's what the Pri Megadim says. So if you both have intention and you also use it, then it will be. Or you can read the Magen Avraham. What's the other way of reading? What's the other read of the Magen Avraham? That no intention is sufficient, because a game is not a kli. Right? There are 2 ways to understand what the Magen Avraham means. Let's see what.
Wait, Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Who the Ramaz Yesh Mitzvah? Who didn't say he-
Tosfot. Yeah, also the Rokeach is talking about the Beit Midrash time. He's not talking about the rest of the day.
Nobody was so positive, right?
Nobody loved it, but he says it's mutar. That is it the right thing to do? That's what Daniel was saying, right? That it's right. That's what you're saying. No one's saying it's usher. Is it wise? Is it the right thing to do? Will Hashem destroy your city afterwards? minor considerations. Close up. But asking usher mutar. So Magen Avraham says you're not allowed to carry the ball around. You're not to tell the ball. It's muktzah, because intention of playing with it does not turn into a kli. You can read that in one of two ways. You can say intention is insufficient, but something more beyond intention is, right? Actual use would work. Thirdly, you can say the intention of playing doesn't turn something into a kli. So let's start with those who take the first path. The Pri Megadim says, right? Based on this Magen Avraham, maybe if you actually play, then it will no longer be muktzah. He finishes with Tzar Chiyun because he's not sure if that's the correct read in Magen Avraham. Maybe the Magen Avraham means there's no way to turn a toy into not muktzah. Based on this, says the Shvut Yitzchak, B'Shem Rav Yoshiv. So
maybe if it's proper like a ball which we have today, it's automatically already.
Oh, excellent. That's exactly what the Shvut Yitzchak says. Correct. It says Shvut Yitzchak, and Philip said, which Shvut Yitzchak said. It's perfect. Right? So let's read what he says. Let's read the actual words, but exactly what Philip is saying. משחק המיוצר מתחילתו לצורך משחק, כיוון שנעשה בו מעשה רב, מעשה רוב, נחשב כלי אף לדעת השולחן ערוך. ולא אסר השולחנות השולחן ערוך whole איסור, טלטול כדור אלא באבן או עץ שהכינה למשחק על ידי ייחוד ומעשה כל דהו. וזה אין די בשימוש למשחק להחשיבם כלי בכך. מה שאין כן, במשחק שיוצר מתחילה למשחק, כיוון שנעשה בו מעשה רב, נחשב כלי. So what he's saying is, and I want to also connect this a bit historically, and say, historically, what did people use for toys? Stones.
Apparently ivory dice.
Nuts
And things like that. Chicken heads.
Yeah.
Right, psikresha, right? Psikresha, right? The classic story of psikresha is a person takes the chicken head, chops the chicken's head off to give the child, and lo and behold, the chicken dies. That's a terrible side effect, but it's a side effect because we're focused on playing a game now. So people didn't invest what we invest in toys, but now toys are a whole industry. So if you invested, you created a toy, of course it's a kli. The whole discussion was about toys that are ad hoc toys, right? You take something from nature and you say, here's my doll. It's a stick. You stick another stick on it. That's a doll. And tomorrow he'll throw it out. It never really properly left nature as such, because it's here today and tomorrow I'll find another one. But the toys we use, they're definitely not muktzah. That's just what Yitzchak says. Yitzchak Yeranen, similarly, Maskan de Milta, מותר לילדים קטנים לשחק בשבת משחק דומינו, דמקה, שחמט, ריצרק, סבלנות, I don't know all the toys, all the games, but I am amused by what about clue? He doesn't say. Also, risk is not mentioned here, so I don't know. Any other examples you want to give us? שכולם משחקים לתענוג, גם מותר לטלטלם לפי שאינם מוקצה. בוודאי שגדולים וילדים שהגיעו לחינוך שהם מצויים לתלמוד תורה, יש להם לשחק בין שבת ובין חול. Generally speaking, you should do better things with your time. בסדר. But the toys aren't muktzah. You created them as toys, and they really are killing. That's the two Yitzchaks here, the Shvut Yitzchak and the Yitzchak here. And then now it's here of Moshe Levi. Rav Moshe Levi, he was expected to be the next Rav Avadia. You heard of Rav Moshe Levi? He was expected, like everyone saw him as expected to be the next Rav Avadia, and then he got sick and died. He was 39. Yeah, so he wrote a few amazing books that you can see what they were saying when they were comparing him to be next to Rav Avadia. He was very, very thorough, very misudar. He has a shoot, Tfilah Moshe. He has on Hilchot Shabbat. What's it called again? Minuchat Ava. He has on Rebit, I forget the name of the book, but also even on Rebit, which is not an easy topic. He has very, very Mesudar, and Birkat Hashem on Hilchot Brachot. And anyway, he completely disagrees with everyone before that, and says, "Ha'emet tored darka. ממה שכתב מרן שולחן ערוך דין זה בין הלכות מוקצה, וגם סתם ולא חילק בין נשים לנשים, משמע שעושה מטעם מוקצה." He doesn't start saying children, adults, אם היה אסור משום ביטול תורה וזלזול בכבוד שבת, היה לו לכתוב דין זה בסימן ש"ז. If the issue is appropriate use of Shabbos time, that should have been in the Siman Shin Zayin that discusses what is appropriate use of Shabbos time. The fact that he wrote it in Siman Shin Chet shows that we're talking about Muktze. So it's Muktze. And the Magen Avraham, who says that the Kavana doesn't make it not Muktze, that'll be true b'chol mikre. And that'll be also in cases where you go out of your way to create such a toy, it'll still be Muktze. Hamura mikol ha'amur, אסור לגדולים, אנשים ונשים, שהגיעו למצוות לשחק בכל מיני משחקים בשבת, אסור לטלטל המשחקים הללו, אפילו לצורך גופן או מקומן. שלא הגיעו למצוות, אין מוחים בידיים משחקים שונים בשבת, because you have to go to the Beit Midrash. What's the kid going to do? Someone plays dominoes.
So you're not allowed to give the kid
Right.
if it's muktzah for you.
Right, so see the next line. אם יש צורך כיוון שהילד בוכה, מותר לגדול לדחוף ברגלו בגופו את המשחק להביאו לילד. So if the child is upset, you could kilachar yad push the toy towards him, make it more accessible for him, but all kilachar yad. You can't take it out of its cabinet on Shabbos and give it to him. Right? It's pretty extreme. But the idea here is that toys writ large are not a kli. And I think the idea is like this. What is a toy and what is a game? What is a toy and what is a game? I think...
By definition, not functional.
Right, because it's only within its own system. You're not doing anything with it. Right? And there's no other function that it fulfills. That's their understanding here. Right? You play the game and then you put it away and nothing really happened. Right? The other kelim we have, I have a table, I put things on the table, right? I have a fork, I take right, etc., right? I have glasses and I put them on and then I can see. All these things are functional. The game isn't functional. It's only within its own system. It's just the word in Hebrew is shashua, right? That ends within it, that's contained within itself. It's not a kli for anything else. It's not a kli for anything else. It's not a kli. I think that's his understanding of why the game remains.
What about a book? A book is also has no functional use. You sit and read it, and then you put it away.
So
that means it's functional. A knife and fork.
But then again,
you use
right,
the knife
but
and
then
fork
once
for
you say that, then the
useful.
game is also
Game is right, but I don't see the distinction. In other words, you use cutlery for its intended
what's the
use,
difference? Yeah.
and you use the game for its intended use. They both were manufactured, designed, sold, marketed, right, for you to use it for it. So,
No, so I'm not using the fork for it. I'm using the fork to eat.
and I'm using the game, I'm using the dice to
play.
advance my little token.
Yeah, but what's the little token? It's also nothing. It's a little token. It's just a token. It's not a real thing. It's a token.
It is a real, it plays a role in the market. I really don't see the distinction. These things are manufactured literally because for the sole purpose to be used as they are, as a kli. And to say that because you can't eat with it or something like that, you can't use it for something outside of the kli designation is being used with, this doesn't seem like an appropriate critique.
So I think the idea is it doesn't have any other functionality. It doesn't.
Since when do we give that restriction?
It doesn't affect anything in the real world. I'm going to give my critique on this in a moment, but I want to hear of Baruch first.
That's $85.4 billion in the real world.
I've said it. That's a different. I want to hear of Baruch. What are you saying? Wait, I can't hear you. I think. Are you muted? I can't hear you for some reason. I'm not. My volume is on. I can't hear you. I don't know why. I'm sorry. Maybe you can try writing because I just.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, now we can. Yes. Now we hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So, in fact, kids and adults learn a lot of skills
Oh.
from all kinds of games. So what we would say is that almost all games, whether it's Risk or Monopoly, or whether it's a game where you're like Sagado,
Yeah.
they are all teaching something on some level. Some with more kavanah and some with less, but they all teach skills that are developmental. And for adults, it's not simply that that it's a waste of time, because it is also a family communication builder.
So I very, very much agree with you. And that's where I was going to go. I think they're understanding. There was a famous story that I do not believe ever happened, but they asked Rav Elyashiv if you're allowed to play basketball on Shabbos, and he says this is basketball, and they say, well, you have 2 hoops, and you throw the ball into the hoops. And he says, well, why can't you just put the ball in the hoops before Shabbos and solve the problem, right? Which. Right. Why is it fun? Because we say the game is to play it on when I want to play it, right? I have time to play it, right? That it's the game, right? You're missing the point of that there's a game here, right? I don't know if it really happens, but it's a good story. I think the assumption, definitely that Tfilah Moshe, but possibly also some of the other post-game, is that games are just a way to pass the time. So, I have a couple of hours spare and I want to just, have some fun. So I'm playing a game. But if you appreciate, I think there's a lot more awareness ever since Piaget, is that his name? Right. The psychologist, the Piaget, he has a whole developmental theory that has a lot to do with how we play games and how children play games at different stages, and how important it is to play games with the children, make sure they play and play the games with the children and with each other, because it teaches it teaches them a lot about how to deal with the world, and about the right way of playing a game, the right way of finding your place in society. What? Winning and losing, and how you play the game, and how to accept loss and how to accept winning is also not an obvious thing. And that prepares them for many, many other things in life. So the games aren't, I think that today's awareness of the importance of games, the importance that it really does create something, I think would shed a different light here. I think that Moshe is assuming the game is just you want to pass the time. So you're not really doing anything. So it's not a kli because it's a tool for making time pass. So what is that? Like there's no functionality in that. Mimele, it's Muktze, because what is it? It's nothing. But if you have an appreciation of what a game is, and why it is important, and as Rav Baruch said, something within the family. And here now, I purposely skipped the Shmer Shabbat Kilchata. Shmer Shabbat Kilchata, he has the easy route here because he goes by the Rima, the Ashkenazim, so you're allowed. But I want to Dafka read his words in the introduction to the Perek, where he talks about kinds of Muktze that you should be aware of in the home. His chapters are divided into like a more functional way of looking at things. Like when you're at home, what things should you be aware of? So he has a thing about toys and what to be aware of in toys. And you might write when you do this. You might fill up you might add air when you do that, right? All those different things. It's not a perek about Muktze. It's a perek about all different, right? What to be aware of if your children are playing with games on Shabbos, right? So he writes, כל הדינים המובאים בפרק הזה אמורים לגבי ילדים למטה מגיל בר או בת מצווה בלבד. אחרי עוברם גיל at the bottom of page 2, sorry. Yeah, I skipped. I brought him there because of Ashkenazim, they have the easy life. They can do whatever they want. But the Sephardim, there's more of machloket about what are you allowed, right? can you use our games? אחרי עוברם גיל זה, ודאי רצוי שימנעו עצמם ממשחק בשבת וביום טוב. כי השבת חמדת ימים, לעונג ניתנה, עונג רוחני, מעין עולם הבא, כל המכבדו מעשות בו דרכיו, נותנים לו נחלה בלי מיצרים. So this is saying, what should you do with your children on Shabbos? Learn Torah. Now, I'm all for learning Torah with our kids on Shabbos. Don't get me wrong. All for that.
By the 5th or 6th hour, though, they kind of.
Right. But exactly. But it's more than that. It's also, there's, as you were saying, as Bara was saying, there's importance to the family dynamic that's created by having a family game. And I think the Oneg Ruchani does fit there. I think, once again, Shabbat Shalom Chata is assuming that the game is just a way to pass the time on Shabbos. So, of course, it's not appropriate. But if you say, no, the game has its own functionality, it creates a family dynamic. It's a way to teach the kids to work together or to communicate in a different way, in a healthier way. It teaches all these other very important things, and therefore I think that is part of building them to who they're going to be, and therefore, of course, as I said, I'm all for learning with the kids on Shabbos. It's great. I try to do it. Baruch Hashem, it's a great thing to do. Don't get me wrong, but the games are also very important, and I wouldn't say, yeah, you're going to play games. It's not an appropriate use of your time. And I think the more we understand the importance of games, we can also say that those who say that the Magen Avraham meant that you need to prepare the game truly, otherwise it's Muktze, right? It's easy. It's harder to make it against that because, all right, you have to, unless the game is prepared in a factory and bought, etc., right? But as long as it's not that game, you can't really make it. If the point is the games are they're not a thing, they're not a kli. I think the more you appreciate that there is a kiliyut to them, they do have true functionality, they have more room to make more broadly against the Tefillah LeMoshe.